When watching as time goes by, you remember the warmth, intelligence, and deeply human moments it offered. But 30 years later, that picture has fractured. Many actors from the series passed away after their roles, following sudden accidents and devastating illnesses. Today, let us remember and honor them. Frank Middlemass as Rocky Hardcastle. Frank Middlemass was born on May 28, 1919, in Eaglescliffe, England. In 1993, at 74 years old, he portrayed Rocky Hardcastle, the quiet, weathered older brother carrying the marks of an earlier generation in As Time Goes By. Although his appearances were limited, Rocky added a layer of family depth, representing all the things left unsaid. In real life, Middlemass's marital life was marked by prolonged tension. He married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce, leaving deep emotional wounds. Pressure from stage work, television, and the persistent feeling of being undervalued caused him to become increasingly withdrawn. Despite this, Middlemass continued working steadily, from the Royal Shakespeare Company to critically acclaimed television roles such as War and Peace. Old age showed little mercy. Middlemass faced respiratory and cardiac problems that significantly weakened his health and limited his ability to work. Prolonged fatigue forced him to gradually withdraw from the spotlight. This period was marked by a slower pace of life, accompanied by the quiet regret of someone who never truly felt placed where he deserved to be. Frank Middlemass passed away on September 8, 2006, at the age of 87, from natural causes related to old age. He left behind an estimated net worth of $2 million, reflecting a long but modest career. Geoffrey Palmer as Lionel Hardcastle. Geoffrey Palmer was born on June 4, 1927, in London, England. At 65 years old, he took on the role of Lionel Hardcastle, a reserved, intellectual man carrying the scars of an old love that never fully healed, in As Time Goes By in 1992. Lionel was not a showy character, but it was precisely the emotional restraint and heavy silences that made the role the spiritual center of the series. In his personal life, Palmer married Sally Green in 1963, a marriage that lasted for decades but was far from effortless. His work in television and theater often kept him away from home, creating lingering tensions that both learned to endure. During this pressured period in his marriage, Palmer continued to appear steadily in major works such as A Fish Called Wanda and The Madness of King George, where he was repeatedly associated with the image of the grumpy Englishman. Advancing age brought more serious challenges. Palmer began facing long-term cardiovascular problems, which forced him to slow his pace of work. Even so, he continued to appear selectively in his later years, from Tomorrow Never Dies to Paddington, retaining his voice, gaze, and presence without noticeable decline. Sadly, Geoffrey Palmer passed away on November 5, 2020, at the age of 93, at his home, due to complications from heart failure and age-related health issues. He left behind an estimated net worth of around $10 million, accumulated over more than 60 years of acting, voice work, and advertising. Moira Fraser as Penny. Moira Fraser was born on December 3, 1923, in Sydney, Australia. At 70 years old, she began playing Penny, a graceful, refined woman who carried the beauty of a generation that had lived long enough to understand that silence can speak louder than words, in As Time Goes By in 1993. Penny did not require dramatic climaxes, because her composure and life experience gave natural weight to every appearance. In her personal life, Fraser's marital journey was a succession of challenges. Her first marriage to Douglas Sutherland ended in divorce, leaving her to raise a child while her career was still unstable. Her second marriage to Roger John Lubbock seemed to promise stability, but instead ended with her husband's death, forcing Fraser to confront late-life loss and profound loneliness. During those years, she continued working with determination, appearing in The Boyfriend and The Good Life, while remaining closely connected to the stage. The cost of that endurance became evident in her final years. Fraser lived with long-term injuries from ballet, physical pain accumulated over decades, before dementia gradually erased her memories and independence. The illness did not arrive suddenly, but quietly took away pieces of who she was. Ultimately, Moira Fraser passed away on December 13, 2009, at the age of 86, due to complications from dementia. She left after a life spent between the spotlight and the wings, with an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million accumulated from theater, television, and film. Vivien Martin as Gwen Flack. Vivien Martin was born on December 28, 1930, in London, England. In 1994, at 64 years old, she played Gwen Flack in As Time Goes By, a discreet, devoted secretary who always stood at the edge of the story, yet quietly kept order in Lionel's world. Gwen needed few words. A well-timed glance was enough to reveal the character's silent intelligence. In real life, Martin's marriage was brief and left lasting emotional aftershocks. In 1976, she married actor John Burgess, but the marriage lasted only 6 weeks. In the post-divorce period, Martin poured all her energy into work, remaining steadfast in radio and television. She became a familiar face on King Street Jr. and other long-running sitcoms, where professional stability partly filled the private void. Old age arrived gently but without mercy. With no specific long-term illness recorded, Martin entered her final years with the natural physical decline of advancing age, gradually withdrawing from the spotlight after more than 4 decades in the profession. Sadly, Vivien Martin passed away on January 22, 2023, at the age of 92, from natural causes. She concluded her journey with an estimated net worth of around $1 million accumulated from television and radio. Joan Sims as Madge. Joan Sims was born on May 9, 1930, in Leyden, England. At 64 years old, she portrayed Madge Hardcastle, a lively, boisterous woman who constantly brought laughter into the Hardcastle home, in As Time Goes By in 1994. Madge represented the brighter side of the series, but behind that smile lay a completely different life. Sims never married, but that did not mean an easy existence. 2 major relationships with Tony Baird and John Walters ended in succession, leaving her with a prolonged sense of abandonment and loneliness. The pressure intensified as she became a familiar face in the Carry On films, where popular success simultaneously trapped her in a comedic image, leading Sims to despair at not being taken seriously. This inner turmoil gradually turned into illness. Sims battled severe depression for many years, then slid into alcoholism, resulting in hospitalizations and physical collapse. Health problems followed one after another: Bell's palsy, a fractured hip, diabetes, COPD, and ultimately, liver failure. Joan Sims passed away on June 27, 2001, at the age of 71, after surgical complications led to liver failure, with diabetes and COPD as contributing factors. She was cremated at Putney Vale Crematorium, with her ashes scattered on the grounds. Sims left behind an estimated net worth of around $3 million, the result of more than 100 films and television programs. Paul Rogers as headmaster. Paul Rogers was born on March 22, 1917, in Plymouth, England. At 75 years old, he appeared in As Time Goes By, 1992, as the headmaster, a dignified, disciplined figure representing academic authority and the old order. Though brief, the role bore the imprint of a seasoned stage actor, where every line carried weight. However, unlike the role, Rogers's personal life was marked by layered tensions. His first marriage to Jocelyn Wynne ended in divorce in 1955, leaving family fractures as his stage career pulled him ever farther away. His second marriage to Rosalind Boxall brought greater stability and lasted until her death in 2004, yet it was not free from conflict between the demands of a large family and an intense work schedule. Amid these private trials, Rogers reached the height of his career with The Homecoming, a role that earned him a Tony Award and affirmed his standing in Shakespearean and modern theater. In his final years, Rogers faced kidney failure, an illness that quietly drained the strength of a man long accustomed to the rigors of stage work. Prolonged treatment forced him to scale back his activities, shifting from a life of performance to a slower pace, accepting the sacrifice of what he cherished most, the stage. Ultimately, Paul Rogers passed away on October 6, 2013, at the age of 96, due to kidney failure. He left behind an estimated net worth of around $4 million, the result of a lifetime devoted to Shakespeare, Broadway, and television. Jeremy Sinden as Alan. Jeremy Sinden was born on June 14, 1950, in London, England. He was 45 years old when he appeared in As Time Goes By, 1995, as Alan, a polished, mature character who projected the steadiness of a man shaped by many life turns. Few knew that behind this composed demeanor lay the heavy pressure of a famous surname. Sinden married Delia Lindsay in 1978 and had 2 daughters. His marriage unfolded alongside an unrelenting effort to escape the shadow of his father, Sir Donald Sinden. Despite early notable roles, such as the rebellious pilot in Star Wars, A New Hope, 1977, and Boy Mulcaster in Brideshead Revisited, 1981, Jeremy continued to struggle to prove himself in an industry that constantly measured him against his predecessor. Professional pressure gradually filtered into family life, especially as major opportunities failed to arrive consistently. Tragedy struck with brutal speed. In the early 1990s, Sinden was diagnosed with lung cancer, a disease that progressed aggressively and abruptly cut short a career entering its prime. Harsh treatment, declining health, and a sharply limited lifespan plunged his family into ongoing tension as he fought illness while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for his wife and children. Sadly, Jeremy Sinden died on May 29, 1996, just 2 weeks before his 46th birthday from lung cancer. He passed away with his career unfinished, leaving behind an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million from stage and television work. Angela Scoular as Glenise. Angela Scoular was born on November 8, 1945, in London, England. In 1996, at 51 years old, she appeared in As Time Goes By as Glenise, a refined, reserved woman who embodied the calm poise of the British middle class. That orderly exterior concealed a deeply unsettled private life, sharply at odds with what audiences saw. She lived with and later married Leslie Phillips in 1982, and together they raised a son in a household shaped by both affection and constant anxiety. Early fame from 2 Bond films, Casino Royale, 1967, and On Her Majesty's Secret Service, 1969, inadvertently tied her to the Bond Girl label, narrowing her chances of securing more serious roles. Professional frustration gradually seeped into family life, eroding the stability her marriage struggled to preserve. Illness became an unrelenting shadow. Scoular battled for many years with depression, bipolar disorder, and anorexia, and she attempted suicide in 1992. When bowel cancer was diagnosed in 2009, even though she was later declared cancer-free, the fear of recurrence haunted her daily. Combined with alcohol dependence, financial anxiety, and recurring mental health crises, her resilience slowly wore away. Ultimately, Angela Scoular died on April 11, 2011, at the age of 65, after inflicting severe chemical injuries upon herself while in a mentally disordered state, driven by psychiatric illness and fear of disease. She ended her life leaving an estimated net worth of around $2 million, largely derived from major film roles in her youth. Judi Dench as Jean Hardcastle. Judi Dench was born on December 9, 1934, in York, England. At 58 years old, she stepped into the role of Jean Hardcastle, a calm, intelligent magazine editor carrying an unfinished love that had stretched across decades. in As Time Goes By in 1992. Jean embodied waiting, postponed choices shaped by time and circumstance, and it was precisely this quality that made the character so haunting. Dench's married life was deeply bound to actor Michael Williams, whom she married in 1971 and lived with for nearly 30 years. They worked together, shared the stage and television, most notably in A Fine Romance, where the boundary between real life and the screen nearly dissolved. But in 2001, Williams died of lung cancer, leaving Dench in profound loneliness. This loss not only shattered her personal life, but also directly affected her working rhythm, even as she was still required to appear publicly in major projects such as Mrs. Brown and Shakespeare in Love. That prolonged emotional pain coincided with a physical challenge. Dench gradually developed macular degeneration, causing severe vision loss and forcing her to rely on others to read scripts aloud, memorizing lines by ear rather than sight. For a stage actress whose craft depended heavily on vision and reflex, this became a quiet but relentless battle. Even so, she continued acting, continued portraying M in the James Bond series, and appearing in roles of great depth. As of 2025, Judi Dench is 91 years old and has largely withdrawn from acting due to declining eyesight, although her artistic spirit remains intact. With an estimated net worth of around $45 million accumulated from 7 decades in theater, film, and television, Dench stands not only as a great actress, but also as a symbol of endurance. Philip Bretherton, as Alistair Deacon. Philip Bretherton was born on May 30, 1955, in Lancashire, England. In 1992, at 37 years old, he stepped into the role of Alistair Deacon in As Time Goes By, a polished, charming businessman who represented the stable choice in contrast to Jean's emotionally charged past love. Alistair appeared as the perfect option on paper, yet lacked the depth the heart truly needed. In real life, Bretherton has always kept his romantic life private, maintaining a long-term partner while staying away from the media, which inadvertently made him less visible than some of his more outspoken co-stars. When As Time Goes By became a major success, he found himself in a difficult position, widely recognized, yet tightly associated with a specific type of supporting gentleman role. During that period, he continued appearing in Coronation Street, Rumpole of the Bailey, and Inspector Morse, striving to broaden his acting range, but finding it difficult to escape Alistair's shadow. The pressure did not come from physical illness, but from professional erosion. After the series, Bretherton had to accept the reality that leading roles were becoming increasingly rare, gradually shifting towards supporting parts, stage work, and even presenting roles. A fragmented work rhythm split between television, theater, and voice work created long-term strain. By 2025, Philip Bretherton is 70 years old and continues to work selectively in theater and television, occasionally taking part in voice projects and nostalgia events. With an estimated net worth of around $3 million accumulated from long-running television work and theater, he represents a steady career, never dazzling, but solid enough to complete the journey on his own terms. Moira Brooker as Judith Hanson. Moira Brooker was born on March 4, 1957, in Croydon, England. In 1992, at 35 years old, she took on the role of Judith Hanson in As Time Goes By, a woman twice divorced, outwardly strong but inwardly filled with insecurity. Judith represented a generation of modern women, independent yet constantly forced to manage the emotional consequences of their own lives. Off-screen, Brooker married actor Anthony Milner in 1985 and had 2 children, while struggling to balance a growing career with family responsibilities. The overwhelming success of As Time Goes By inadvertently became a shadow, firmly associating her with the character of Judith and narrowing her range of future roles. After the series ended, she slowed her on-screen appearances, choosing smaller projects such as ghosts and stage work, as family responsibilities continued to mount. Tragedy struck in 2015 when Anthony Milner passed away, leaving Brooker to raise her children alone while confronting a profound emotional void. Although she did not suffer from serious physical illness, the psychological shock of this loss led her to nearly withdraw from the spotlight, shifting her focus toward private life and behind-the-scenes work, distancing herself from the punishing pace of long-running television. By 2025, Moira Brooker is 68 years old, living quietly and only occasionally participating in small projects or nostalgia events connected to As Time Goes By. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, she represents a form of success sufficient to protect a peaceful life after years marked by loss and sacrifice. Jenny Funnell as Sandy. Jenny Funnell was born on May 20, 1963, in Kenya. In 1992, at 29 years old, she took on the role of Sandy in As Time Goes By, a young, straightforward secretary who represented the new generation, constantly positioned between Jean's life experience and the pragmatic choices of older adults. Sandy brought a fresh energy to the series, while also reflecting the instability of youth. Funnell's personal life became closely tied to single motherhood, raising her daughter while maintaining a demanding work schedule. Without publicized marriages or scandals, the pressure of balancing stage work, television, and family responsibilities forced her to be far more selective with roles. After As Time Goes By, Funnell appeared sporadically in The Bill, Doctors, and West End Theatre, while accepting professional pauses in order to prioritize her personal life. Funnell's greatest strain was from career fragmentation. As television opportunities declined, she shifted decisively into voice acting and video game performance, fields that demand high discipline while offering little public spotlight. Long-term work on projects such as Bloodborne and Dark Souls allowed her to maintain financial stability, but also placed her in a position of steady labor without the broad recognition she once had during the sitcom era. As of 2025, Jenny Funnell is 62 years old and continues to work in voice acting, theater, and carefully selected projects while dedicating time to her family. With an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million accumulated from television and voice work, she stands as a clear example of a long, sustainable career path. Janet Henfrey as Mrs. Bale. Janet Henfrey was born on August 16, 1935, in Aldershot, England. In 1993, at 58 years old, she appeared as Mrs. Bale in As Time Goes By, a restrained, sharp woman who appeared only briefly but was memorable enough to add depth to the film's portrayal of middle-class English life. It was the kind of small role that demanded absolute precision, something Henfrey had honed over many decades. Her personal life became closely tied to her profession, often at the expense of stability. Constant touring and international work meant she rarely had a fixed professional home. During those years, she appeared in The Singing Detective and Doctor Who, productions that required high levels of acting discipline, while simultaneously accepting the reality that she was consistently cast in supporting roles. Henfrey's greatest pressure did not come from physical illness, but from the prolonged nature of a career without a major breakthrough. After more than 50 years on stage and screen, she lived with the feeling of being always necessary but rarely recognized. A non-stop work rhythm and constant shifts between British theater and international projects tested her mental endurance, forcing her to learn how to persist steadily rather than wait for a moment of spotlight. As of 2025, Janet Henfrey is 90 years old, living quietly in London and only occasionally appearing at artistic events and poetry readings. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million accumulated from more than half a century of acting, she stands as a representative figure of a dedicated supporting artist. David Oyelowo as Patrick. David Oyelowo was born on April 1, 1976, in Oxford, England. In 2005, at the age of 29, he appeared as Patrick in As Time Goes By, a young, intellectual, and polished presence who entered the show's middle-aged world like a fresh breeze, while also serving as a test of generational integration and difference. Patrick did not have much screen time, but the role marked the moment Oyelowo began to gain broader recognition on British television. In his personal life, Oyelowo's marriage has been a rare source of enduring stability. He married Jessica Oyelowo in 1998, when both were very young, and together they raised 4 children through multiple geographic moves, from the UK to the United States. That stable family life ran parallel to a major professional turning point, from spooks to increasingly substantial film roles, most notably The Butler and then Selma, where he portrayed Martin Luther King Jr. This domestic stability allowed Oyelowo to take creative risks, including producing his own projects rather than waiting for opportunities within the Hollywood system. Oyelowo's greatest strain has not come from physical illness, but from structural pressure, racism, role-based stereotyping, and the burdens of independent production. After Selma, he faced the paradox of widespread acclaim without an Oscar nomination, which pushed him to forge his own path through his company Yoruba Saxon Productions. Balancing acting and producing over many years created sustained mental and financial pressure, especially as he pursued historical and political stories that were difficult to sell and demanded patience and resilience in the face of short-term setbacks. As of 2025, David Oyelowo is 49 years old and remains highly active as an actor-producer, most recently in television and film projects marked by a strong personal imprint. With an estimated net worth of around $6 million accumulated from acting and production, Oyelowo represents a generation of artists who choose autonomy over safety, broad enough for him to tell the stories he believes truly need to be told. Paul Chapman as Stephen. Paul Chapman was born on May 10, 1939, in London, England. At 54 years old, he took on the role of Stephen in As Time Goes By, 1993. A gentleman who was often overshadowed, representing those who stand behind the scenes both within families and in society. Stephen did not make a strong first impression, but remained memorable because of his authenticity. Chapman's personal life was constantly measured against his family legacy. As the brother of screenwriter John Chapman and nephew of Edward Chapman, he entered the profession under an unspoken expectation to live up to the Chapman name. Despite early recognition in coldits and series such as A Bit of Ado, he was repeatedly cast in supporting roles. This pressure extended throughout his marriage and private life, as he came to accept a career that was stable but never truly explosive, much like the character Stephen himself. Chapman was not known to suffer from serious illness, but long-term professional stress was ever present. Maintaining steady work for decades, from Shakespearean theater to long-running television series such as Midsummer Murders, required endurance and constant adaptation. For an actor who consistently worked in the background, the greatest fear was not the loss of spotlight, but being forgotten as new generations emerged. By 2025, Paul Chapman is 86 years old and has largely withdrawn from acting, living a quiet life after a long career. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million accumulated mainly from television work, he leaves behind the image of a resilient and enduring actor. They once brought laughter, warmth, and deeply human moments to millions of viewers, but behind the screen, many departed in loneliness, illness, or tragedies no one anticipated. Which actor from As Time Goes By do you remember as the most heartbreaking? Leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe to continue joining us for these moving behind-the-scenes stories of television legends.